With that, welcome inside this edition of Big Ten Today. I'm your host, Rick Pizzo. We are excited to get you out to LA. Year 2 of the Deshaun Foster era should be a little smoother than his first go-round with his alma mater. Ashley Adamson, Yogi Roth had the chance to take in training camp. They'll share exactly what they saw. But we begin today with the big story, not just in the Big Ten, but one of the biggest stories in all of college football. Quarterback competition coming to an end in Columbus, at least as it relates to the Buckeyes' opening day starter. Ryan Day naming Julian Sayin as the man under center for Ohio State's Week 1 showdown inside the shoe against top-ranked Texas. Sayin beating out Lincoln Kienholz for the job, thanks to what Day described as more consistency and some separation in overall performance during OSU's most recent workouts.
My responsibilities to the Buckeyes, my responsibilities to this team, and making sure that we're ready to play in 12 days. And that's where we're going to keep the focus. That being said, Julian Sayin will be the starting quarterback against Texas. It was a close competition. I think both guys, we all feel confident, can win a game for us. I think Julian separated himself really over the last week with his consistent play. I feel like our guys are confident again with both quarterbacks. I think we'll need both quarterbacks. Lincoln did a lot of great things, but we're going to name Julian the starter here, give him the majority of the reps with the ones, and go prepare to beat Texas. You're always looking for consistency and taking care of the football, and when you start with practice 1 in the spring and then kind of do study on the entire, growth over 6 months, you see that there was a lot of growth made. And you look at the numbers and the production, we felt like, he was, in a situation where he was ready to go play in this game. We also feel like Lincoln's ready to play. But, overall, Julian was more consistent.
Much more on this decision and all things Ohio State and Big Ten football with Doug Lesmerises. He's a Buckeye insider that's covered Ohio State for a couple of decades. Well, Doug, let's start with the news that we just learned earlier this week. I don't think it's any surprise. Most of us expected Julian Sayin to be the guy, but Lincoln Kienholz pushed him. Why ultimately did Ryan Day make this call?
Throwing it matters. How you spin it matters. And I think Julian Sayin is an excellent thrower of the football. And the thing that happened in this competition is they won a national championship last year with Will Howard. And the quarterback between Julian Sayin and Lincoln Kienholz, who is more like Will Howard, is Lincoln Kienholz. And so then it makes you think, okay, well, that won a national championship. Is that maybe attractive to Ryan Day? But you look at the quarterbacks he's had, from Dwayne Haskins to Justin Fields, but especially C.J. Stroud. I think shorthand, C.J. Stroud's the easiest comparison for Julian Sayin. And then you're talking processing, you're talking accuracy, you're talking quick release, you're talking the ability to spin the ball. And so the only thing, like the hesitation for me slightly was, man, they are coming off a national championship with, it's not that Will Howard can't throw it. Of course he can, but he's a little bigger, right? Kienholz isn't as big as Will Howard, but he's bigger than Sayin. Maybe more of a run threat, maybe a better athlete, right? Is that suddenly on Ryan Day's mind? But I think the best man won. They were going to pick the best guy. They weren't going to lean on a style, but I think it also is a reminder that Ryan Day, his roots as a quarterback, his roots as a quarterback's coach, as an offensive coordinator, as a schemer, he wants a guy who can chuck it, and that's Julian Sayin.
Well, Doug, how much of a chance did the media get to see this competition, and Sayin specifically during preseason practice, throughout training camp, and what did you see?
Yeah, so the first 3 were open, and then after that, you didn't really get to see it. But I think you kind of knew what the deal was, and it makes it a little easier when the guys are different enough that they're, you watch Lincoln Kienholz and you watch Julian Sayin, and I think anybody, even a dumb guy like me, you can kind of understand the differences there, like the strengths, the weaknesses, where they have to come along. And it's just a little different, though. But the thing that I found super interesting and also complicated the situation a little bit, and Ryan Day said this multiple times, is he compared this competition to the Dwayne Haskins-Joe Burrow competition from 2018. And in this scenario, Julian Sayin is Dwayne Haskins and Lincoln Kienholz is Joe Burrow, which is like, okay, well, the guy who won the job. You want to be the guy who won the job. But then when the guy who didn't win the job goes on to win the Heisman, be the number one pick in the draft, and win the national championship, then it kind of makes you think, oh my God, is that what Lincoln Kienholz could be? So Lincoln Kienholz showed them something, and I think they believe that Lincoln Kienholz can still grow into something. Now, nobody's ever going to grow into Joe Burrow again. But that's an interesting little sidelight here. But I can remember watching 2018 and thinking to myself, the way Dwayne Haskins threw it, you got to pick him. And I think that's where this is similar. The way Julian Sayin throws it, you got to pick him.
Interesting comparison without doubt, and I'm sure the Lincoln Kienholz would be fine with cashing the kinds of checks that Joe Burrow is cashing right now in the NFL as well. We understand why the quarterback competition is front and center, certainly at Ohio State, but outside that competition, Doug, right now, what's the biggest storyline as the Buckeyes get set to come out of camp and face Texas in week 1?
So you guys heard of Jeremiah Smith? He's good.
He's pretty good.
You get familiar with Caleb Downs? He's good. But here's the real thing, I think. And I could argue that winning this job was maybe as important, more important than winning the quarterback job, is Austin Sareveld at left tackle, because he is a homegrown Buckeye. He was a highly rated recruit. He did play some last year at guard, but Ethan Onyeonwa came in from Rice as a transfer and was a big name in the portal. They brought in Phillip Daniels from Minnesota as another big name in the portal. They had obviously the injuries at tackle last year with Josh Simmons getting hurt, and they tried somebody and that didn't work. And then they slid Donovan Jackson over. And you could argue that Donovan Jackson at tackle was the MVP of Ohio State's playoff run, but they had to replace 2 tackles. And that's almost as big a deal as replacing a quarterback. And Austin Sareveld, as not the portal guy, as a homegrown Ohio guy, as a guy who'd played guard, just won the left tackle job. And I don't even know if we thought that was open, because it's like, oh, they got this veteran transfer from Rice who's going to be it. And that he did that is such a credit to him, but is also super important to what Ohio State is doing. So we're going to find out right away against Texas, like how that looks. But they could not, from the weight room to his leadership, he was named a captain. Like the things that Austin Sareveld has done on and off the field since last season ended, they're honestly extraordinary. And I don't know that I've seen a lot of guys make a move like this. Austin Sareveld at left tackle is a huge deal for Ohio State.
Now, I'm not sure that any team can win a national championship and go into the next season and the coach uses the underdog mentality, but in at least one of the 2 major preseason polls, the Buckeyes are behind not just Texas, but also Big Ten competitor Penn State. How do you view Ohio State versus Penn State in terms of talent and preseason expectations?
So I think it's reasonable for Penn State to be where they are. I think part of that is coordinator driven. When you look at Andy Koltelnicki in year 2 as a coordinator for Penn State, and then Jim Knowles leaving Ohio State for Penn State, I don't think there's anybody who has a better pair of coordinators in college football, and they might be the best. Whereas at Ohio State, Brian Hartline's going to be the offensive coordinator, the play caller for the first time play caller. And Matt Patricia's coming from the NFL and hasn't coached in college football in a long time. So we can't forget that. And I do think that matters. And then just with the depth of talent back at Penn State, with the guys in the backfield, with Drew Aller as a third-year starter, you start going through the contenders in college football. There are not a ton of third-year starters. Drew Aller leaps to mind. Cade Klubnik at Clemson leaps to mind. But that compared with Julian Sayin, who's thrown a handful of passes in his career, that makes sense to me. And then, Penn State has a defensive identity. So does Ohio State, but a lot of those guys haven't played much. So it's easy to fall back on. James Franklin's beaten Ohio State once in his career. It's easy to fall back on that record in big-time games, and you can't ignore that. But I also think when I think about Penn State and Ohio State in this era, and that Ohio State has clearly been the dominant team and has dominated Penn State, I don't know how many times you would have looked at it and said, Penn State has the better roster. I think maybe never in James Franklin's tenure would you ever have said, oh, Penn State's better. They should have won. And I think if you just look at the rosters this year, we know how talented Ohio State is, but you combine talent and experience. I think you can look at Penn State this year and say, yeah, I think Penn State's better. And then you have to evaluate Penn State versus Ohio State in that way, as opposed to only falling back on the fact that this has been a hill that Penn State has most often not been able to climb.
Of course, we can talk about it. It will all play out. Doug, we have 1 minute left. I want to mention the other teams inside the top 20. You have Oregon that's top 10, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana in between 10 and 20. Among that group, or if you want to go outside that group, that's fine as well. Who's the third team, the team most likely to challenge Ohio State and or Penn State if that opening arises?
I feel like we're getting a little whiplash on the, like, everybody was in on Illinois, and now I feel like maybe people are like, everybody's in on Illinois. Maybe I don't want to be in on Illinois. When I did my preseason poll, I did the schedule game. I played it out. I wound up with a 3-way tie at 8-1 in the Big Ten in the regular season. And the 3 teams I had in that tie were Penn State, Ohio State, and Illinois. So that includes Ohio State losing at Illinois. That is a tall task. But when I mentioned 3-year starters at quarterback, Luke Altmaier at Illinois is also that. Replacing Pat Bryant is a huge deal. The offensive line is all back, but they have to play better. They do have to play better. That secondary is awesome. They have a couple different guys who can get after the passer, and I like their coordinators. Like, this coaching staff is good. Aaron Henry's been good. I think even to be even better, though, Illinois needs to be a top 25 defense, which they haven't been since Ryan Walters left, but I think they can be. So if you're getting whiplash on Illinois, I just want to tell people it's okay to believe in Illinois because there is a lot there. And by the way, remember when Brett Bielema won 3 straight Big Ten titles? This guy knows how to win in the Big Ten, and I think maybe that gets overlooked.
Yep, look at that schedule. Preseason, Illinois is favored in 10 of its 12 regular season games. Of course, one that you picked Illinois to win is one that they're not the preseason favorite, but the good news for the Illini against Ohio State, they are at home when they face the Buckeyes. Doug, truly appreciate the time. As always, hey, enjoy the start of the season. It's almost here, my friend.
It's awesome. That's my birthday is the day the season starts. So that'll be a fun birthday, blowing out candles and watching Ohio State, Texas.
Happy early birthday.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Big Ten Today. After a somewhat unexpected up and down season during Deshaun Foster's first year as the head Bruin, UCLA heads into 2025 with no questions at quarterback, a new offensive coordinator, and Big Mo on its side after winning 4 of its last 6 games to close the season. Ashley Adamson and Yogi Roth have more from LA after spending a day with the Bruins.
Rick, thank you so much. I think change is the theme of the offseason here for these 2025 UCLA Bruins, headed into year 2 under Deshaun Foster. And what is old is new again. I mean, you look at all the different pieces that they brought in, over 50 new players, 8 coaches for a team that won 5 games a year ago, but finished strong. So let's start with what you need to do when you have so many new pieces, Yogi. You need to try and get them to know each other well and fit together. So the connection and culture that we heard about from their trip to Costa Mesa, what did you take away from today?
That's the first thing. Like, get to the beach. That's how you can connect everybody, right? Down to Costa Mesa. And it was gorgeous. I went down there early on in training camp, Ash. The setup was absolutely phenomenal. A couple miles from the water. You felt that ocean breeze. Practice facility was immaculate. But to your point, real work had to get done. And having been there and now being here, real work did get done. And it all began with the foundation. You could have a roster full of talented players, but if they don't connect, if there's not a relationship there, you have no shot. Deshaun Foster knows that. He's played at the highest of level. This new staff that you referenced, they're incredible. I won't get into it, but overall, like, that was job number 1. Get guys to trust one another, and I think they did it.
Yeah, and I think when you talk to the guys that we talked to today and some of the players and coaches, which we'll get into a little bit, but it feels like they finally just made some space for that connection, which is what it's all about. You know, there's so much of what you have to do in order to prepare for the long, grueling football season that it is coming for any Big Ten team. But to be able to pause and say, okay, we're going to take a step away from football and actually make some of those bonds happen. Karaoke, which is really a good team bonding experience.
Beach volleyball.
I can tell you, beach volleyball also. But the vulnerability piece is the one that really stuck out to me. And Deshaun Foster told us, like, look, the coaches all got up in front of the players and told them things about our stories and our whys and stuff that they didn't know. And in talking to the players, like, that stuff makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I think there's a couple layers to that. One, and you can't run from it, it's a transactional state of the game right now. Players are coming in versus getting recruiting and following a team throughout the majority of their high school careers. There's a different world, especially when you look at the amount of new faces that are here on both sides of the ball, especially in the trenches, offensive line, A bunch of transfers defensive front. The entire defensive line, for the most part, are going to be transfers this season. So you have to open up that door. And I love how Akaika Malloy shared with us, when the coaches get up there and share their why and why they do what they do and take all the time to pour into this craft, the players couldn't be on their phone. In addition, they weren't receiving it through social media. They were receiving it face-to-face. And you can just feel that it landed. Talking to a couple of players like Gary Smith III and John Vaughns, they referenced that as well. And these are the guys that are holdovers. They've been here for the entirety of their college careers. John Vaughns in his 6th year, and it still landed on them. And I think what it allowed players to do, and Coach Foster referenced it, is after those meetings, you saw guys walking off the field a little slower together, maybe stopping and pausing and communicating together, hanging out in the facility a little bit more. And I think that's what they hope will carry this team in the fall, because it's going to have to with the competitive temperament that this league is.
They bring in a lot of new transfers, as you reference and talk about, but the one that stole the show and all the headlines was the quarterback, Nico Iamaleava. And I thought it was really interesting when we talked to Tino Sunseri, the new offensive coordinator. He admitted, he said, look, I'm hearing all this stuff and seeing all this stuff, and I didn't know what to believe until I actually met the young man. And my feeling about him was totally changed. And I thought that was very honest of him to admit that. But watching him, he is all of 6'6". It's one thing to have it listed on the roster and then see it out there. But he's a really special talent. You can just tell.
And I think he's a special soul, to be honest with you. Talking to the staff, I got to sit in on the quarterback meeting. You watch the diligent work ethic. That's part of being a quarterback. But then you start to talk to other staffers, like the assistant quarterback coach, the graduate assistants, and they reference how he was the one texting them in the middle of the night, asking about coverages, living in this facility. There's a sense of urgency for him. And make no mistake about it, he was one of the top quarterbacks in America coming out. He started for multiple seasons, led a team to the college football playoff. I don't think he's getting enough play. UCLA is one of the best quarterbacks in America on their roster, folks. And to your point, at 6'6", his arm talent is obvious after watching him in practice. Where he gets rid of the football, very few will get batted down. And he's a dual threat player. Don't be shocked with the run game. We saw it at Tennessee. I think this is a much more intricate offense than the one that he ran at Tennessee. It's just a different style. You could debate which one you like more or less, but the things that he has to do with the line of scrimmage, whether it's pass protection, route concepts, run game, quarterback responsibility, it's just a different deal under Tino Sunseri's system. We saw it with Curtis Rourke at Indiana a year ago. So a challenge because he didn't have spring, but boy, from week 1 at camp in Costa Mesa, from my eyes, Ash, to this microphone at least, to week 3, when camp is over and here they go into Utah prep, he looks like a different player, just someone that's even more comfortable in the system and his surroundings.
I loved what he said, I learned so much football already from Tino Sunseri since I've been here. And I think about what is in store for this offense that scored 18 points a game a year ago, and that was where they had a lot of issues. They couldn't finish in the red zone. They couldn't run the ball. They have a stable of running backs right now, Jet in particular, who we talked to earlier, that comes over from Cal that I think is going to give this offense a whole new dimension.
Yeah, I think they got 4 real backs, and that's not even including their freshman class. They brought in really talented players in that regard. So you look at Jalen Berger, he's the returner, right? This is the 2-time transfer. He kind of became the back late in the season. I think he'll have a chance to be really gifted every down back, but he doesn't have to be. Anthony Woods, he's the guy who transferred Idaho State to Utah, was injured last year. Now he's got a chance. He was really one of the most impressive players I saw in practice. And then you reference the Jet, Javion Thomas. He can take the top off. So how many different ways can Tino Sunseri utilize those 3 backs? I think a lot. But most importantly, to your point, it's the offensive line. Ash, we've been all over the Big Ten. They look the part. If you don't believe me, call Jerry DiNardo. He knows offensive line better than anybody. You look at this group, and they're just physical. They're athletic. Their bodies look good. And then you add in the QB run game element to this thing. I think they're not Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon's roster. They don't have that depth. But they are firmly in the conversation at the top of that next tier, which is going to be fun for everybody watching games because they should all be pretty tight.
Well, let's talk real quick about the defense, too, because I think, again, they were the unit that kept them in a lot of games last year and allowed them to win those 5 games that they did win. Akaika Malloy, 2nd year as a defensive coordinator, and he talked about kind of the same thing as Deshaun, that once you've done it for a year, you learn so much. There's so much that you think that you can understand, but until you've sat in that seat, you don't know. So what are you expecting from this defense?
Well, he had the entire defense read the book The Slight Edge this offseason. So I think I'm looking at them to have another little slight edge. They're replacing 90+% of that defense. Off to the NFL, off to graduation, and here comes an entirely new defensive front. Gary Smith III, he comes on back, but he didn't play for the last year and a half or so. I think he's got a chance to be a breakout player for this defense. The scheme that Akai Kamole deploys should have them extremely competitive, and I'd imagine extremely aggressive pressure standpoint, coming from a bunch of different places. They're always a fun game to call, so looking forward to that and seeing if they can gain that slight edge this season.
It's going to be fun to see all the new puzzle pieces come together. August 30th against Utah in the Rose Bowl on Fox. 8 p.m. local kickoff is when things will get underway, but for now, we're going to go do some squats.
Karaoke. I thought you were going to say karaoke.
Oh, karaoke, yes.
In Costa Mesa at the beach, right?
You're going to be doing karaoke. I'm going to be doing some bench press. Right. Rick, we'll send it back to you.
I'm going with Yogi. As for the Bruins' crosstown rivals, we touch on all things Trojan football coming up later tonight. The USC training camp show debuts at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, with multiple airings throughout the course of the evening. The Big Ten has placed 7 players on the AP All-America preseason first team, led by Ohio State wideout Jeremiah Smith, who is joined by OSU teammate Caleb Downs. Penn State leads all Big Ten teams with 3 first-teamers, Zane Durant, Nick Singleton, and the Big O. Michigan kicker Dominic Zavada and Oregon safety Dylan Thieneman also on the list. Of course, Thieneman, a huge add in the transfer portal for the Ducks, and head coach Dan Lanning. That'll do it for this edition of Big Ten Today. Coming up on Wednesday, Dave Diani, Iowa women's soccer coach, will be with us after the Hawkeyes started their season with a win over number 6 Arkansas and now play number 16 TCU later this week right here on the Big Ten Network.